Rev up your engines!
Here's another decision of GM, and I forecast this will bite them in the rear end in the long run. They're adding 1,200 jobs to their Michigan plants to meet the demand for large SUVs. Of course, everyone jumps on the SUV bandwagon, and they're making bigger ones. They're not thinking long term here. They pollute more, they get worse gas mileage. At the present moment, with cheap gasoline, people are buying them. But are these guys thinking long term? No, they're not thinking long term. They're thinking short term. Make some more big SUVs, because that's making us money right now, right now. We don't care about the future. We got to make money right now. And that is what has bit the entire American car manufacturing companies in the rear end over time, because they had no future plan. Everything was so short term, while the Japanese were building what people want, to perfect them over time, thinking, hey, what are these people going to be buying 5-10 years from now? GM's thinking, big SUVs make us money, let's make as many of them as we possibly can, because we got to make a profit. I've seen that over the years. Hey, and another prediction of mine, it's going to bite them in the rear end. Eventually, the price of gas has to go up. It's a limited commodity. It's only logic. And then these big SUVs, nobody's going to want them. In my grandfather's day, he was also a mechanic. He bought a Cadillac once for like $200. It was a straight 8, had 8 cylinders in a row, monstrosity. The fenders were so thick he pushed cars with them when we had to push them around. But he got it for almost nothing because they were tremendous gas hogs. Now, since my father ran a gas station, it was no big deal. They had 40,000 gallons of fuel sitting there, so they didn't care if it got crummy gas mileage. He only lived 3 miles from the gas station anyway, so they didn't have to worry about gas mileage. But he got it cheap because the price of gas was going up, and those giant gas guzzlers, you can imagine what a straight 8 got. That thing got horrendous gas mileage. Nobody wanted them anymore. Eventually, in the future, these giant SUVs, they're going to become extinct just like the dinosaurs. Perhaps GM will join them. Well, if you've been watching me, you know I got a video that tells you why you shouldn't buy a car at Carvana. Well, here's yet another reason. The company is loaded with debt. For example, last year, they lost $2.29 a share on their stock. The company was over $1.4 billion in debt. And here's the thing about Carvana, as I said. Yeah, you can put the coin in the machine and get your car. You know what a gimmick that is, right? Well, their overhead is staggering. Whatever the price is, that's what they're going to take. They are notorious for being extremely high priced. Well, guess why? The company's $1.4 billion in debt, and the stock lost $2.29 a share. Let me tell you, that's not a healthy company, you know? And guess what they're going to be doing? They want to raise more money. The only way they make money is by selling cars to people. They're going to be trying to sell them for even more money, raise the prices to pay for their insanely high overhead. When you buy something, you don't want to go to the place that's got the biggest overhead. They got to pay for the overhead. That's why people say, oh, Scotty, they ripped me off at the dealer. They charged me too much. Well, you should see what their overhead is. Some of these dealers have overhead of millions of dollars a year. Guess who pays the overhead? You as their customer. So if you're not their customer, you're not helping paying for their overhead. You know, I can imagine in my business, not $1 million overhead. Boy, if I could make $1 million fixing cars a year, I'd be happy as could be, you know? These guys have to make $1 million just to break even. And the Carvana thing is the same thing. They are so heavily in debt. It's all borrowed money. And yeah, they're expanding. But do you remember a while back there was that donut company, Krispy Kreme? And they were flying and they were the big stock market baby. Well, do you see many Krispy Kremes around anymore? No, because they expanded too fast. They didn't make any money and down they went. I forecast the same thing with Carvana. I've seen this in the past. There was that giant pawn shop company that ran that We Want to Be Your Car Co. and they sold used cars. Well, they went bankrupt too, and I forecast the same thing with Carvana myself. Chris Carota says, my daughter's dead set on buying a Volkswagen Passat. Help, which is better, the new Passat with a 4-cylinder turbo gas or a low mileage 12 to 15 TDI diesel? Apparently has all the updates. Your daughter's insane. Those are terrible cars. But out of that, by far, you'd get the diesel because they can last quite some time. The turbo engines just burn themselves out as time goes on. And anyways, it's a new one, so you're really pissing your money down the toilet. Diesel still could have a reasonable amount of life in it. It's still a Volkswagen, but they don't have nearly the headaches that the gasoline, especially turbo Volkswagen engines do. But try to talk her into getting a Toyota or Honda, not that Volkswagen. I mean, if it's your money, you're going to be be throwing it away. And if it's her money, you're going to get sad because she's going to be wasting it on Volkswagen repairs with guys that charge a ton of money to work on them because they've got the specialized Volkswagen equipment that nobody else has. So they're just going to charge up the wazoo because they can, because hardly anybody wants to work on those things. They're such horrendous pieces of German insanity that unless you have all that equipment, you're not going to be able to figure it out. And the guys that do, hey, they paid a lot of money for that equipment, so they're going to charge you a ton to repair it. Billy's in a hole says, I got an '08 Land Rover V8. It's got the code PO420, inefficient catalytic converter. Help, the catalytic converters cost a fortune. Yeah, well, you're the one who bought a Land Rover. What do you expect? What measures the efficiency of the catalytic converter is mainly the oxygen sensors that are after the catalytic converter. So, you want to take a stab at it, change the catalytic converter oxygen sensors, the ones that are behind them. I did one a couple weeks ago on Land Rover and it fixed it because it was giving bad data, so it thought that the computer thought the catalytic converter was bad and tripped the catalytic converter was inefficient, but it was actually the oxygen sensors that went out. And I changed quite a few of them on those Land Rovers. So try the oxygen sensors. Pray it's that and not those super expensive Land Rover catalytic converters. All cars work the same way. The rear ones are the ones that read it. And if you want to take a gamble, hey, go buy oxygen sensors after the cats because they measure how the cat's working and pray that fixes the problem. Larry Mandello's Ghost says, got 2010 Mercury, Grand Mercury V8. It doesn't start and it doesn't crank. Right after I got into a collision where a guy backed into me in a parking lot. Obviously, somehow it's damaged the electronics when they don't even crank. What you want to do is turn the key on. Just turn the key on. Don't try to start it. Turn the key on so the idiot lights are on. See what's going on with the security system. If security system's flashing on and off, then somehow it's damaged the wiring to the security system. I see that all the time because they got wires in the front on those things that do often short out when they get in a small smack. Now, you're going to have to go through the whole wiring system. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, but go exactly where it got crunched in and check the wires around there. I mean, it's 10 years old, so I'm assuming you don't have collision on the thing, because if you did, you just have an insurance company paid. If you got to try to fix it yourself, go into the crushed area and find out where there's wires that have been broken and torn up, and I guarantee you, you're probably going to find a whole bunch of them in there. If it was big enough crunch, just follow all the wires, and knowing those products, check the ground wires too, because there's a lot of ground wires in the front there by the radiator that could have knocked the ground wire off. Do the same thing. Your Ray says, I know you want to get Toyota, Scotty, but Volkswagen, are any of them okay if I bought a late 90s, early 2000s? Late 90s could be a decent vehicle. They were better made then, but you're talking about a 20-something year old vehicle. It's probably worn out from old age. You know, I mean, if you can find one and it's cheap enough and it runs okay, it could be a good stopgap car, but it's not something you're going to be driving for 5-10 years. It's just too old and too worn out. You're always better. Get a little bit more money, get a Toyota. Or if you can't, get an older Toyota, because the older Toyotas can still run a long time. They're not like the Volkswagens. Time doesn't necessarily finish them off like it does all the plastic crap that's in Volkswagen. So if I were you, I would nix the whole Volkswagen idea unless you could find a 90s one that seemed to be in really good shape that didn't cost much money and you don't mind playing with fire and hoping it lasts a while. Lily Langtree's Ghost says, got a 2014 Kia Sorento V6. My engine rattles when I start it up, then it goes away. It's a typical problem with those Kias. Your timing chain connects the camshaft to the crankshaft to spin everything. It's a chain and it's got a tensioner. On those things, the tensioners go bad all the time. Odds are it needs a new tensioner. There's actually a technical service bulletin that was all the way back in September 2015, that TSB. I'm assuming that yours is the same as all the other ones I worked on, that it needs a timing chain tensioner. Trying to get Kia to pay for it, but odds they won't, because what? It's a 2014. Generally, they're not going to cover anything that old. It was their design flaw, but it will probably need a timing chain tensioner. Let any mechanic look at it. Any good one can check that in 5 minutes and say, yeah, that's what it needs. Christian P8 says, my aunt's 2015 Highlander will randomly have an engine stall while operating the vehicle. Any speed, going straight ahead or turning, the entire instrument panel goes dark. That's a good clue. Instrument panel goes dark. That means you're losing power. You want to check all the way from the battery positive and negative terminal, all the wires going back to make sure they're not corroded, loose, where they plug into things, unplug them, look to see if the metal is green, means it's corroded inside. And sometimes it's as simple as an ignition switch. You got a bad ignition switch, you go down the road, hit a bump or something, if it shorts out, the instrument panel will go out, the car will die. You definitely have an electric problem. You got to figure out where that electric problem is. So start right at the battery. Sometimes it's as simple as a loose battery terminal. I mean, there's so many electrical things that can do it, and that's a 2015, so it's pretty computerized. Start at the battery, both positive and negative cable. Pray it's something simple like a loose or corroded cable. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.